All right. Good morning, C. Grover. How's it going? Let's see. This needs to be on its own. Instead. Okay. Yeah. Is all right. Good morning. Happy Saturday. I am starting in on a new project this morning. We are, well, let's get the camera. Oh, the camera. Actually, we're going up a little ways to user code project land instead of down into the core or the libraries. Oh, yeah, restart that. Okay. We have a Macropad, and I am working on kind of trying to iterate through the interaction, the application, if you will. Right now, the Macropad is doing one very specific thing when you press one very specific button. We are trying to build that out into a more usable concept, and the thing that it does right now is load up a message and then encrypt it using essentially the same mechanisms that are in the Enigma machine. So for folks that don't know, this was like a World War II era encryption device. It was like a typewriter almost looking thing, but it did not type onto paper. And instead the idea was you would type on the keyboard, it would light up a certain light for each button that you press. So like you would type a letter on the keyboard, and then a certain light would light up, a certain letter, I should say, would light up. Another person would presumably write down that letter that lit up, and then you would keep doing this. You'd press another button, another light would light up. You'd write that down. Press another button, light, right, button, light, right. All of this until you're done with your whole message. This would essentially do two things. If you have a plain message, it would encrypt it so that it's scrambled, so that somebody else would not be able to read it. This is the idea. This encryption obviously was cracked, so like did not necessarily work for its intended purpose the full time. But this is the idea of the machine. You would take your message in plain text, you would encrypt it with this. The person on the other end who's supposed to receive this message would get your jumbled message. You would then take that jumbled message, feed it through the same machine with the same settings, or I should say, you know, a copy of the machine, not the like physically exact same one, but you know, another instance of the same machine. You would feed your scrambled message in, and then when you press those scrambled button letters, the lights that light up would actually be the original message. So this would allow you to unscramble it back to plain text. I, off-stream, have implemented this in Python. There was an existing Python implementation as well. I have done it a bit differently, and I've packed it in to where it can work inside CircuitPython nicely. To essentially mimic the physical mechanisms in this. It's actually a very fascinating from a physical mechanisms perspective, it's actually a fascinating device. Let me shout out this video. This video, I would not have been able to make this without. I watched this video probably like 4 or 5 times. Yeah, this is it. Jared Owen, how did an Enigma machine work? This is a really sweet video. If you are interested in this device at all, this person has like very detailed description of what it does, what it's for, how to use it, and then even more in depth, like how it works, like how the circuit works. They are explaining the electronics of like literally where the pixies flow and when. Super fascinating mechanism. I use this video a lot in order to implement the Python code inside of this, basically. And so what I'm working on right now is kind of like I have, you know, a function that lets you encrypt some text and lets you choose your settings, so to speak. The settings that you get to choose on the device are 3 different rotors in whatever order you elect, and then a 4th rotor, which is a special one called a reflector. Then you also get some like settings and some offsets that you can do for each of those. And then there's also plugs, which I have not done plugs at all yet, but plugs are described in this video as well. I have the basics of like a Python function that does this. What I want is a Macropad that kind of like functions as this device would have. Like, it's obviously going to be different because I don't have a full keyboard. I don't think I'm going to do the lights. So like, you know, it's going to be a fair amount different, but it's going to serve the same purpose. Like this device, we're trying to create the application that will allow you to put your text in, get your ciphertext, and then you know, send it to your friend, and your friend with their Macropad running the same program will then be able to, you know, unscramble it back to the plain text. And I have a bunch of ideas for different ways I want this to work. Not all of them are set in stone. Certainly, I think we'll discover as we start building it out different ways and different ideas, different ways that things can work. But this is kind of the high level idea. How's it going, Johnny Bergdahl? Good morning to you. And so I am just gonna jump right in. I think, where should we pick to start? I think, I mean, this is pretty high level. I think we would probably want to get that done before too much of anything. Yeah, let's start there. That's kind of like everything else is going to branch from that. So I want it, right now the way it works is it just boots up. It even like prints some debugging kind of stuff to make sure things are working. And then what it does is it will look for a file called input.txt. This is when you press a button. Right now it's set to the 11 button. When you press that button, it will look for that file. If it finds the file, it will read it, and then that will be the text that it will encrypt. And what it will do is it will actually just reboot the microcontroller with microcontroller reset, because inside BootPy, we have this code which will say if input text is existing, if it still exists and it's on the drive, then inside BootPy, we're going to mount as writable and delete it, and then mount back as readable. So basically, you would save your input text into that file, input text, and then when the device reboots, it's actually going to delete it for you, because obviously you wouldn't want to keep your original text around. And this is all it does right now, but we want to get it to where the user can specify all of this stuff. Right now, these are all just hard-coded. We want it to where the user can specify these things a couple of different ways, using either the inputs on the Macropad itself, the buttons, and the knob. I also think it'd be nice if you could preset some of these things in. So if you have a configuration file, perhaps, that will exist on the device, and select these things as well. Although possibly we'd want to delete the configuration file as well, because really what it boils down to is the configuration, the selection that you have made for these choices that you get to make about how you use the machine. this effectively is your password. The encryption in this works a fair bit differently than like modern encryption, but kind of what it boils down to in my conclusion, I guess, and I'm not trained in any of this, but just understanding it to the point to be able to write the code, what I'm understanding is your selection of these things is effectively your password. The idea is they would use different rotors in different orders, you know, on different days of the week, or different people sending different message or whatever. There would be some method to the way that they selected which rotors to use and what order, as well as the offsets and the settings. And then the person receiving the message needs to put the exact same thing. They need to use the exact same rotors in the exact same order. They need to have the exact same settings and the exact same offsets. And if all of that stuff matches perfectly, then the actual text will come back out. But if any one of those things is off, even by just one number, an entirely different, completely scrambled message will come out of the system. So effectively, this is your secret, the part that you would not, like, you definitely don't want third parties who are snooping on your messages, obviously, to have your secret. Otherwise, then they can predict, or not predict, they can just read your messages. As it turns out, the way that the rotors are hard-coded, essentially, made it to where there were somewhat limited possibilities, and very famously, this was cracked with a computer to be able to basically predict which messages, like predict which of these things were chosen on a given message, and therefore be able to ultimately decrypt it. Okay. This is a long monologue about the history of this device, which is also all explained in the video, so check that out if you want a deeper understanding than what I have here. So for this, though, I will just jump right in on the kind of like, we're going to start with a high-level state machine and a main menu. So usually when I want that, I'm going to say maybe like a current state, but we'll also do like a state main menu. Typically just kind of assign numbers at random. You can use strings for these. That's a tip. I think maybe C. Grover, you've mentioned that a few times, using strings for these, which is pretty nice. You could do something like your main menu or something as a string, which means later on in your code, if you print it out, then you'll be printing out the exact thing. Maybe we'll do that. Let's give that a try for now. I'm going to start with just that state. Obviously, with the state machine, we're going to want to add more eventually, but for right now, we're just going to have one. That's going to basically check and make sure we're connected to the computer, and we can initialize HID, get the Macropad. Another thing we're going to be doing is kind of embellishing this a bit to make it more user-friendly. So like right now we have a button just randomly, the 11 button, I think it's this one down here. When you press it, that's when it activates, but like there's nothing telling you that, so maybe we'll put a light, we'll put some stuff to kind of clean it up a bit. I'm gonna, I think, let's just save here. I'm actually gonna copy that real fast. Because this one has a bunch of test stuff in it, I'm gonna start deleting some of those things out. Because all of this will run before you've ever pressed the button, which will actually impact the message that comes out, because essentially every time you press a button, one or more of the rotors will turn, which means that if you press the same button again, you'll get a different letter the next time. So by encrypting and decrypting the test message, it's changing the current rotation of the rotors, which means by the time we would press this button, it would, effectively be different. Yep. That is definitely it. Yeah, that is an awesome video. This person animated in meticulous detail the machine, and I think they say, forgive me, I don't recall it's like a museum or something, but in that video, Jared gives props to the museum or historical, I guess, like a person who has these machines. I want to say it's like a museum that has got these devices, and this museum actually like took them apart and sent very detailed photos and things, so that this person who made the video could get a look inside the machine and figure out how stuff interacted and all this stuff, so that they could make the 3D renders in order to include in the video. So a long chain of people who helped it get to the point where I could even understand it to write the code that does this, for sure. I think we'll probably be getting key events no matter what state we're in, so I'll put that outside. You know, I maybe want to have, lately, one of the things that I've been doing is, instead of just having simple variables, I have been doing a thing like context, and then have it be a dictionary, and then I effectively put all my variables on this. And the upside of this is that the fields of dictionaries can be edited from inside of functions without any other special stuff, whereas variables cannot. So if we had a variable called current state, if we wrote another function and we wanted to change current state inside that function, we would need to make it global. But if we put current state on a dictionary, then even though that dictionary is not global, all of a sudden we are allowed to change it from inside that function, which I find strange, but is how it works, and is why I kind of have been using these dictionaries more so for my sort of like, you know, I guess global variables, effectively they are, but variables I want to change from inside functions. Current state, so that one's going to be, I'll do state main menu. I will still do the variable here for now. That's when we're going to check this. We want to check key event outside. I think we do that inside probably, because maybe some states we won't care. You know, probably not true, but maybe, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I think we want that inside for now. So if there is a key event, right now we're printing it. I mean, this would probably actually be good to have this here, but still have this one here. Oh. And so for sure, one of the other states that we're going to have is going to be state choose. I mean, I think we're going to have one state for each rotor, so I think we're going to have state choose rotor 1, 2, 3, also the reflector. And we need to be able to get into the state for one of these. So let's say the top 3 buttons up here, when you're in the main menu, if you press one of these 3 buttons, it will mean that we want to go to the set rotor state for that rotor. So that would be rotor 1, that would be rotor 2, that would be rotor 3. Technically we need a reflector as well, so I guess that's going to probably be 4 or something in the second row. We'll figure that out later, but let's say those 3 for now are how we get to the choose rotor states. So we can come and add more button press handlers here. Those are what? That is number 0, 1, and 2. Just gonna fill these in so that the editor is happy. But we'll probably erase it once we put code. So when it is 1, we want to be changing the current state to be rotor 1, which we could basically copy this, which I guess is what I should have done before. So that's going to change our state to be that. And now we can, whoa. This could be an elif, I guess, right? Is there any reason one way or another to do it that way? I don't know if it matters. Choose rotor 1. So when we are in the choose rotor 1 state, let's see, we need a way to get back to the main menu. So I kind of like the idea of bottom left, maybe, serving as sort of a generalized back button, like as we are in all these various states. I think I like that button to get us back to the main menu. So let's say that was button 9. Whoops. What? Change to vertical button orientation. Get 4 in a row. Basically, we go sideways. I do kind of like it, yeah. Landscape on the... Is this what you mean, basically? Do the whole thing sideways, essentially, so that we have a row of 4? And then, essentially, we'd have maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 to be rotor 1, 2, 3, and reflector. The only bit... I will say the only thing that worries me a little bit about this orientation is the width of the screen. We either have to keep our screen at a 90 degree, so that essentially you need to turn it to look at it like this, which is orientation it's in, or if we do rotate it, then we have only the width of it for words, which gets a bit tough. The words are too long. And I do ultimately want to be showing on the screen like the current configuration, like which rotors you've selected and which, like what settings and what offsets you have. That's not that much information though. We can compress that pretty small. How's it going, DJ Devin? Or just use it in portrait. So let's imagine a second here. If we let me sometimes like to sort of whiteboard in here a little bit. Let me just take a very, very, very rudimentary quick stab at laying it out portrait. If we can make that work, then I think I'm probably good to go. I don't know the exact aspect ratio, and that doesn't matter, as long as we're kind of similar-ish. Fill, I want to fill it with not this. Good morning, DJ Devin as well. I don't remember if I said color. That's line. This area. Wait, what? Why is this? Oh, okay, now I broke the outside edge. I don't like the, I don't like this for some reason. I cannot find text box. It's never sticking out to me. So if the rotors, maybe it could be like W1, W2, W3. Those are effectively all we really need necessarily. Like we could probably represent each rotor with 2 digits, maybe 3 digits on some of the bigger ones. The rotors have names like Waltz. I don't know the right way to pronounce it, probably. Waltz 1, Waltz 2, 3, 4, 5. So there was 5 different disks, and then there was 3 different reflectors, and then I think there's a bunch of other disks that were created later on as well. But these are kind of, if not the original ones, these are the simplest set that I found. So that's all I have so far. So this could represent the 3 disks, and then top down could represent the order they're in, and then you'd have the reflector as well. Something like that, maybe. And then you could still have settings and offsets, which I don't know the correct names for, but essentially you have 2 sets of 3. Why is this not inserting? Essentially I have 2 sets of 3 settings that are 1 to 26 effectively. There's 0 to 25 in my code though. So one of them would be like that. Maybe put those down though. Do we really need anything else on the screen? At some point, plugs maybe, but I don't even have plugs actually implemented yet. Unless you rearrange the entire kitchen, or your coffee maker in the dining room. I don't know. Yeah, it does seem pretty crazy to just start moving stuff around. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate for sure, yeah. In general, I try, like, leave people, coffee's a thing that you gotta leave people's alone. You gotta leave people's coffee alone. It's never really a good thing to start messing with somebody's coffee. It's not a good way to prank anybody. It's not a good thing to just take or move or change or mess with, really. People tend to be fairly protective. Okay. I think I'm okay with this. I think we can make this work. There's really not that much to display. I mean, maybe there may still be like, I don't know, maybe indicator, like it's some way we need to know what mode we're in, so somehow this screen is going to need to tell us what mode we're in, but that can be fairly straightforward, I think. It could even be as simple as a little arrow or a triangle or something. That's just pointing to the one that was not rotating at all. I don't know how to rotate things. Even if there's just like a little triangle pointing to the one that currently you're in the mode for. So if the triangle's pointing to this one, then that means you're in the select rotor 1. And then if the triangle moves down to this one, you're now in select rotor 2, select rotor 3, select reflector. I mean, this could even work for these things, honestly. Yeah, let's give it a try. I'm going to try it this way. Whiteboard sketch is vertically oriented like the buttons would be. Whiteboard sketch is vertically oriented like the buttons would be. Oh, I see what you're saying. That's true, isn't it? So yeah, so that's a good way to think about it as well, is if we were holding the device this way, instead of using the 3 there for the 3 modes, and then needing a 4th one, we could go down instead. So it'd be like rotor 1, rotor 2, rotor 3, reflector. I do kind of like that as well, actually, just using it that way. And then, well, I will say, though, the crux of it is it's always going to be opposite. Like essentially because the aspect ratio of the buttons is opposite the aspect ratio of the display. What that means is like, because like if we did have the display this way, then my inclination would be to put these out side by side instead of stacked. Maybe there would still be room. How many lines are there's 4 lines showing right now. How many lines can this show at that size? I don't know if we would keep the size the exact same. Basically get 5 lines. But they're very small. Just 5 lines. More than 4, so we could make it a bit bigger and still have room for 4 lines. Nice to match the button position with the display contents. Yeah, I do agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Maybe we'll try this way. Let's try this way, and then I'll line them up still vertically. So we'll do it still kind of like these 4 here, but our rectangle will be different. I don't know why there's like a random, I don't know what that is. Whoa, okay, that's the pivot point. Fair enough. I wish the pivot point was just in the center automatically. I don't know why. The sizing is not quite exact, but we'll do something kind of like this. And then, I mean, this can still work fine. Show the selection. And then maybe middle buttons, maybe the middle row of buttons could get you to, or even just one of them potentially, could get you to selecting these things instead. So like maybe you would go select, get into mode for choose rotor 1, and then you press a button and that gets you into select index for rotor 1, and then you press the button again, it gets you to select offset for rotor 1. So like you chain together all your settings for rotor 1, and then you could move on. Okay. So when you are in really any of the rotor select modes, what we are going to need is a mapping of the small version to put on the display for one thing, and then the actual object itself, because ultimately we're going to need to pass that object to the constructor when we create it. However, the mapping, I feel like, probably belongs up here in what is currently called CodePy, not really down in Enigma Machine, because it's at the application level. It's not really at the Enigma Machine object level. Should we put it on context or make a different one? I feel like we can make a different one. Context, what it could have, though, is like our current configuration object. I don't know why, if I want these all to be shouty. This would be an object, and it would have things like rotor. Yeah, I don't know. I think we're gonna. We're gonna go to not shouty on this. are there? The variables, I think, are fine as constants. Essentially, shouty is like it's a constant. So it shouldn't change. Footer1 equals, it will be, I mean, know if that's what we want to default it to, but we can still figure that out a bit later as well. Gonna have those. It's gonna have, I think I called them offsets, ring indexes, and ring settings. Ring indexes. I don't know. We might make this. We should, I think, probably make this a list because we want to be able to modify the contents without making a new one. We also have ring settings, which is effectively the same thing. A list of 3 numbers. What are the... Oh, right, okay. Okay, and then when we press the go button, we'll reference our config on the context as the stuff that we pass. And I know I'm jumping around a lot, but we actually do have that here. We could go ahead and say, we could in fact just say, let's not initialize that unless we are in here already. And then what we initialize it with is the values from our context config footer1. Oh, I accidentally copied instead of pasted. I think we need to put these on new lines. Okay. Mine's not short enough to use the end button yet. Effectively. We need a reflector. I forgot the reflector. I wonder why there's not an index or a setting for the reflector. Seems like there could be, but I don't think there was. They only have 3 of these little windows, which is where the one of the 2, either index or setting, shines through. Huh. So you just have to always put the reflector in the correct position when you start. I wonder if it can change? I don't know if it, like, mechanically only fits one way or something like that. Oops. Linking the state dictionary. Oh, liking the state dictionary concept, I used a state machine class object as well. Nice. That would be interesting to make the state machine into a more objectified thing, like states as, or objects rather. Where's oh, we're going. Yeah, I find it really bizarre that you are allowed to change the things inside of a dictionary from in a function but that you're not allowed to change just like a regular variable. Like those things feel very much like basically the same action to me. It's odd that one is quote unquote allowed and one is not. Of course, obviously you could use global and then make it so it is allowed, but I don't know, feels awkward. That becomes global once it's on a thing, in a dictionary. Okay. So that means basically that our default settings are stored in this. Is not necessarily ideal. We may even it may even be worthwhile to say there are no defaults, so the user has to set them. I don't know. Oh, now it is actually stopping. Let's go ahead and make sure that this is going to work. I think it should. The only real changes we made is not initializing the Enigma machine until the button gets pressed, and then when we initialize it, we are using all the values from our context to initialize it with. But otherwise, everything should work the same. We are in REPL. What I'm going to do is save CodePy. Has red, so we're going to figure out why it has red. Okay, this is down here. Let's say past that for now. Go back and change these, I think, because I do like the idea of using the column of 4 instead. Okay. So the way we do this is we go new file, input.txt. Doesn't do numbers. Doesn't really do punctuation either, honestly. It will just pass it through. But if you were actually encrypting messages, I think you're probably incentivized not to put punctuation because that would make it easier to figure out what's in the message. State.current from class was useful. State.current. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so you keep your current one as just on state as a field. That kind of gives you the best of both worlds, honestly. You get the named things, but they could still actually be ints under the hood, but you get to use their names. And because it's on an object, it gets that same property like the dictionary, where it's kind of like all of its things are, I don't know if they're technically global, but they're allowed to be changed inside a function as if they were. Yeah. We'll definitely be getting rid of Blinka because we'll be using display.io ultimately. Right now, it's just printing from the terminal. So yeah, we'll definitely once we make a group and display show it, it will take over that left side there with Blinka. Okay, so we've got our text loaded up. I'm gonna save that, and then we run it by doing Control D. I'm gonna go ahead and make a, well, there's already temp.txt. I'll just delete that. And so basically now it's waiting on us to press the 11 button. And when we press the 11 button, it will check for our file. If it exists, it'll read it. It will initialize that. It will call layout write, which is gonna basically type the encrypted one. It will wait for 3 seconds and then it will reboot, and the rebooting should cause input.txt to get deleted. Make sure that we're not in our code file. Okay. So that's our message. There is our device rebooting. It should delete input.txt. We no longer, it would be between these two, I think, if my alphabetizing is working correctly, which is not guaranteed, but I don't see it nonetheless. PyCharm will keep it, I think. No, it has disappeared by now. If you keep it open, PyCharm will keep it because PyCharm really wants to save everything that you type into it. So this is now our scrambled message, and so we would send this to our friend via email or Discord or whatever. We would send that to them, and now once they receive it, they're going to take it and they're going to put it into their input. So they're going to put that in there, save it. Now the code is running on their side. I'll come down below, that way we can keep it in case we need it. And then they would, and now it would be important that they need to have all the same settings. In our case, we took the default settings right now, so we don't need to change anything, but they would load it up, they would do it on their side, they would put it in, and boom, the original message comes back out, albeit it is shouty now instead of lowercase, but. And then same thing, it reboots and it deletes input.txt, which this time, so you can see PyCharm has like hung on for a second, but I think if we like refreshed it, now it disappears, and it also closed from up here. So it gets deleted, but PyCharm keeps a like a temp copy essentially. Which obviously, if you were trying to use this with secrets, you wouldn't type it into PyCharm. Include a state of current. Include a couple finite state machine helpers in the class, like advance set, or ultimately just overkill. I could see it being useful. It depends on the project, though. I mean, I could see sometimes where it'd be really nice to have basically like logical rules that choose kind of different ways the advancing can work. Like maybe sometimes you want to advance by one state, or maybe sometimes you want to go back to the beginning. If there's common things like that, I could see the interface being pretty nice to have those in functions instead of just relying on the user code to set the variable correctly. Okay. So the basics of that is working. Let's get it to where we can select rotor 1. So we have it to where we can go into the mode for it, but we want to change it because we don't want to use 0, 1, and 2 anymore. Instead, I do like the idea of going down, although I also like the idea of left side being back. Like back feels like left to me. So I think the back button should either be bottom left or top left, and I tend to be on the bottom left side of things myself. So maybe one of the other two rows would be the rotor selectors. Right now I have this button as the kind of like send button. That could still change. That could be basically anything. Okay. Yeah. Let's start it on that way. Let's do down the right side. Those 4 buttons for the 4 rotor selectors. So that is actually button 2. That's gonna take us to rotor 1. And I am gonna change the order of these so that they're in rotor order, but it's gonna be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's gonna get us to rotor 2, and then 6, 7, 8. It's going to get us to rotor 3. We actually want one more with well, 11 is actually already there. So let's say, let's change this for now to 0. We'll call that top left in order to like send or whatever. Then that will be 11, and this will be state choose reflector. Okay, so now the buttons down the right side get us into the choose rotor states. However, the only one that has any behavior is choose rotor 1, and the behavior is do nothing. So let's fix some of that. So when we're in the choose rotor state, what we want to do is, as the user turns the rotary encoder, we want to be cycling through the possible rotors. Do I want this to be a list? I'm gonna just do label. You can use a free crypto tool to kind of see the inner workings of Enigma. There are so many different revisions of the machine. It's not. Yeah. This is also only just one version of the machine or whatever. The earliest one, I believe, probably the least sophisticated. There's also they created new rotors as well, new wheels essentially, or rings as I've called them a few times. Yeah, some of them even with different properties, like the rotors that I have loaded up in here, they have what's called a notch. What I call a notch. I don't know if that's the official name. The notch basically determines when the next rotor over will advance as well. And I think they made some rotors with multiple notches even, so that the next rotor advances more than one time per complete revolution of the current rotor. None of mine do behave that way, and actually my code currently would not handle it correctly either. Nice. I'll have to check that one out. Who's that? That's Reddit's super small right now because of the cryptography for everybody. Nice. Yeah, I'll have to check this one out. I don't think I saw this one. A lot of different models. I think that this is the one that the 3D video that I linked before. I think that's the one that it's based off of, which is essentially what my code is based off of as well. There's a US patent for it? Was it patented before the war? Seems a little bit weird. I'll have to watch this one. Yeah, thank you for the link. I'll check this one out. E4. Why do we don't have, I think we have just not imported them probably. It might be nice to have a way to import all of these without listing them all out. We could break up the library into a package, and then it could have like one file that's all of them. So ultimately, we're gonna need these also, because there's also 3 different reflectors. Eventually, I would like it too so the user could add your own. That's the thing as well. Like the core concept, you could reuse the concept with different rotors, as far as I understand it. Which, like, if you have to physically machine them, then that's kind of difficult. But if, like, in my code, the rotor is essentially a string with 26 characters, and that's effectively like what it uses instead of the physical widget. So if you can make a new string with 26 characters in it, then you can define your own new rotor. Okay, so yeah, let's start getting our display going as well, because I'm gonna want to show, 1, that we are in the choose rotor 1 state, and then 2, that while we turn the encoder, we want to be cycling through the choices for rotor 1. And in order to really be able to see that or understand what's happening, we need to be having some stuff on display. We might as well not initialize the display until after maybe the Macropad, I guess. So let's say main group. It's gonna want to import some stuff. Might as well just get display IO. Label. I do kind of want like a little pointer thing. Let's use a circle for now, and then eventually we could turn it into a triangle. Circle, I think, is going to be slightly easier because I think we could just do this to get it. Okay, we got us a group. We could even go... Oh, does this not have... Oh, but it's... Is it macropad.display? I think it should be board.display. I think it'll be there. We should put it in display, though, actually. And I always like having display, lowercase variable display. This way, if you ever port this code to a device without a built-in display, you can just put your driver initialization here, and you still have this variable, and then the rest of your code is all the same. Why do I keep getting into... I feel like I've ended up in caps mode like 4 times without meaning it already. I don't understand. Or the main group. So that should, by itself, just get rid of Blinka and the REPL. Obviously, we don't show anything else, so... one thing we need to decide is, are we going to have a bunch of different labels, or one label with multiple things inside of it? I think to start with, I'm going to take the one label with multiple things inside of it approach. I think I'm going to make one label with 4 lines in it, and each line will be the rotor that is currently selected. So I will make a rotor. I'm going to call this rotor selection text. It's going to be a bitmap label, which has text. Just do text like this. Wait a second. See, this is rotor 1, which is the object. We need a way to get the label. Maybe these should not be directly the rotor objects, but instead maybe they should be the index within this list. And then when you need to use them, you have to look it up out of the list. The only other option I see really is storing an index separately. Or, okay, we could store this entire object, though. So this could be, like, possible rotors 0, which would be this whole thing, which includes the rotor and... Yeah, that's what we want right there. Interactive. They have cryptography challenges. Bring back old cryptography messages from like 1500s to challenge you to crack using the tool. Nice. Run by an ex-German crypto guy, equivalent to German NSA. Authority on cryptography. The tool can... Crypto tool, is that the name... Is that the name of the channel? No, that was cryptography for everybody. You can use the free crypto tool. Okay, that's like a... some other kind of resource online thing or something, a program or something. Crypto tool can crack basic substitution, even monophonic ciphers in like 30 seconds. Advanced lessons allow you to create an encrypted stream like Skype, but really private. Niels. Yeah, I have just barely scratched the surface. How did I get involved? So what happened is I watched a documentary actually about the way that they cracked the Enigma machine, which got me interested in specifically the Enigma machine. I would say that I'm like vaguely interested in the wider world of cryptography, but not at the like cutting edge level. The math makes my eyes glaze over a bit too much for being at the cutting edge of actual real cryptography that's used today. This was simple enough that I was able to, like, albeit I had to watch that animation video several times over, but I was able to kind of grok the entirety of how it operates. But even that took a while. I probably would not be, I would not have the patience to do it for anything sort of real or modern, I suspect. Got it because I was participating in trying to crack Zodiac code for a while. I think a few years ago they made some more progress on one of those, I think. I'm sure the story of the hack is unique. A presentation of the work from a Polish scientist that was parallel to maybe the UK story that you know. About cracking it, basically. Yeah. I mean, I definitely have very little knowledge. The one documentary that I found, I want to say it was on Curiosity Stream. It's a wider series about code breaking, I think, but I don't know what the name of it. But there was one that was about this. It was like either 30 minutes or an hour. And that is basically all the more that I know about it. But it was enough to get me interested enough to want to try to recreate it in Python code. Yeah, okay, about the Enigma crack, the way it was cracked, essentially. Yeah, I don't know. It's the information that gets shared in the aftermath of war is definitely always going to be cloudy, I would say. There's very little way to know, like, really what happened all the way. Yeah. Should have got ice for my water before I started. We'll need to make a possible reflectors, I think, as well here at some point, but... And then when we use these things, we need to actually get the rotor, so that's going to be down when we create this. Actually, now we need to say rotor1 and then rotor. This means also we can say big rotor1 label. And then we're just going to go new line. There's still plenty of ciphers, century old, that never been cracked. Crypto tools program. Okay. Breakthrough I know of was related to capturing a machine and the code in a submarine. That was before being exposed to whatever Poland was doing. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, grabbing a person is certainly the easiest way, I would assume, to crack it. More so than the computer and the algorithm or anything else. If you have a person and you convince them, compel them to tell you how it's used, that can help you quite a bit. Poland reverse engineered the disks at the time. They worked on it years before Britain due to the fear of German invasion. Built on that knowledge. That's part of, I think, what was described in the documentary I watched as well, is Poland was working on it for a while for different matters, and then kind of ultimately it became useful in the war. It'll do MD5 AES as far as the things it will crack. Okay. We should be getting our new lines here. This should tell us all of our three things. So we have text. Text is going to go there. We can probably just do that by itself. Rotor selection dot anchor point 0 position. I'll say maybe we want to get just a tad inside screen a little bit. We don't want to use too much for padding though. Add that to main group. ROT13. ROTX. Start with ROT or variable ROTX. History of Alan Turing. And begin with Poland's work. Somehow we have crashed it? Crashed it. Layer is already in a group. I guess I already added it, probably. Oh, I just... Yeah. What if it wasn't, though? Hold on. What if it wasn't? Oh dear. That must break something, right? Already used. Huh. Yep. All right. Note to self. Don't put a group in itself. Or if you do, don't try to take it out. I feel as though we have infinite loops. Control-C does nothing right now. Note to self. Test the ramifications of group inside of itself later on. I've crashed again. I never actually got to seeing the error message. Oh, yeah, we did actually. Layer in a group. Right. Couldn't be any more though. Maybe it's not saved. There we go. Okay. It is not visible. It's not ideal. One thing is the line height is too high. But actually be unclear about why it's like off the top edge there. Does not make very much sense to me. Might be a bug in anchor point or something. That didn't move. Okay, what's going on now? That's odd. Okay, we're not. That not move. Anchored position. Truthfully though, we want it way closer to the top left even, so let's see what it looks like if it's right up snug in the corner. Imitation game? Not heard of it. In 13 alphabetic order, ROTX, where you choose the number and it's your secret. Yeah. That's interesting. The how it came to rotors. Write it down on a strip of leather or something and then wrap it around a thing. I'd never really stopped to consider how they landed upon rotors. Interesting lineage. We feel lower now. See, this is like, I feel like now we're backwards of what I expected. I don't understand. Maybe the top of the display is. Maybe the top of the display is just lower than it feels like. I mean, what if we do negative? That should cut it off, right? That should cut it off, I think. Maybe the line height matters? Line spacing? I'm pretty sure 1.25 is default. Still feels like we have room to spare though, right? Why is that not the edge? I don't know, doesn't matter, I guess. Now we're definitely off. We'll want enough room to the side of it to draw our selector thing. So let's say maybe like, I don't know, we'll say 8 should be plenty, I think. You try to have the Macropad keyboard be a window on the full keyboard, using the rotary to move the windows left and right, so the initial display. I did not try it. That's an interesting way to do it, though. You rotor through the different sort of like stripes of the keyboard, essentially. That would be interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways we could have it not print through HID or other means the value. We could have it just show on the display if we wanted. It's just we don't have very much display, so you'd have to like read a couple of words at a time or something. I'm also not trying to make it like super duper secure. It's definitely just meant to be a toy. So that you could share a message with your best friend or something, right? Like, obviously you would never probably want to send it through HID or send it through any computer. I mean, any USB cable effectively, right? Doesn't really matter what the protocol, like, ultimately you probably would not want to send it out to the computer if you were using this kind of thing for any sort of legitimate purpose. But it's just way easier, right? Like, as a user, being able to have it just print everything into the file just makes it so much easier than having to try to like read one word at a time or 4 words at a time or whatever we fit into the display. The column of like sweeping across the keyboard, that's a fascinating concept that I never considered before. I don't think that I would want to do it for this thing in particular, but that is an interesting idea as like a kind of wacky keyboard concept. Like, your miniature keyboard is so miniature that it only has 12 buttons and you have to sweep through the kind of windows. That's a really interesting idea for an input device. You want to send the encrypted to the computer but keep the secret in the Macropad. But the problem with that is the secret, the encrypted is the decrypted, because the algorithm is I don't know what it's called technically, but it goes like, you use the same algorithm to decode because it's not 2 different ones. If you send the results of the algorithm to the computer, then sometimes those results will be scrambled, but sometimes they will be plain text, because the nature of it is like, you run it again, the same thing again, get the output. So if you send the scrambled one to the computer, you essentially have to send the plain text one to the computer, because it doesn't know which one is which. And in fact, in its world, neither is neither, really. Not like, neither of them have any special meaning. They're both just strings that happen to match to each other through this complicated thing. Not say the computer to your friend. Yeah, that part's definitely true. Yeah, you send the encrypted bit to your friend, and then they would put it in on their side and spit it into just like Notepad or whatever, something that won't send it anywhere, basically. Encryption you want to display only. Encryption you want to display only, so typing what your friend sent you. Type, and your Macropad changes it. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's one way. It's definitely one way that it can work. It's not what I have in mind for it, but I definitely welcome people to take it and tweak it and make it work however. I'm kind of valuing the ease of entry over the actual secureness of the overall system. I'm willing to say I'll make the overall system less secure if it makes it easier to use. To a point, right? Like, at some point we would draw the line on there somewhere, but for me the line is over that. I think it's fine to have them type it in on the computer, since it's so much more convenient because it has the full keyboard. So let's say we have a mode selector, mode select icon, which we're gonna make a circle, but I don't remember what circle does, what it takes. Pixel shader, radius XY. Okay, so we need a palette. We could just have one color, I think, for now. Palette equals, I'll just make it, that will be palette, that will be radius of, we have 8 pixels. That means our radius can't be bigger than 4. Probably we want to go a little smaller. XY. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We're going to be moving it around. Oh, a palette. Oh. Definitely fair. Okay. And then let's just add it to the group to see it get drawn in the top left. Or see it crash the program. Extra positional argument. Radius XY palette. Pixel shader. Or do they, maybe we have to give them names? Okay. Excuse me, might be too big. Because right now x is 0, we would want x to be at least 3. And now it's going to be kind of touching the, and I guess it doesn't have to be, we could just draw part of the circle, but at some point we're going to be selecting a thing in a different column, so we shouldn't really be relying on our thing being drawn halfway off in order to make it look like it should. I have to end up scooting these just a hair more. Let's probably down on something like 10. We're gonna want, I think, variables to store the locations of these things, because I don't want to just pepper the code with hard-coded, like, you know, pixel 8 happens to be the selected location for this thing or whatever. So we could just do a tuple, I think, actually. What did I have before? I think it was 2. Go. 2, 8. I'm just gonna take a guess at these. Probably be wrong, but. So let's set the location based on that. Or actually, let's just default it to there. Let's put hidden true. Because technically, when we very first start, we're not in the select rotor mode. We're in the main menu. Circle has no hidden. Really? Is that true? Maybe it's new. Or that. Um, okay. Easy. Say, what's the boot button? I think the button in the rotary encoder is the boot button, maybe, though. But that is able to just do a double reset. Okay. Yeah, that one did not crash and did hide. Should have right tab, but that one did not crash. How did this get move this? Oh, you know what it is? Is we are. That's what I. Okay. Did not move. This was. Everything's all jacked because I did move it, but we don't need this. Hidden true. That works fine. So when we go to that mode, when we're in that mode, first of all, we want to say if mode select icon dot hidden, we want to make it visible. We want to move it to where it needs to be. Be back. Okay. X, this would be the, what is it, mode. Locations. For 1, X is 0. So when we go to the state choose rotor 1, if that thing was hidden, we want to make it visible. And change the location. Truthfully, we want to change the location even if it was visible, though, right? Like if we went from choose rotor 1 mode straight to choose rotor 2 mode, we would already be visible, but we would still need to change the XY location. Oh. My sound. Big fan of defining as many static display objects up front as possible and revealing them when needed. We could do that. We could have different icons for each one. I think I like moving it around, though. I mean, I don't like moving it around. It makes the code a lot more convoluted, but it uses fewer display objects. In this case, the display objects aren't that big, so I probably could get away without bothering. I think I like moving it around, though. I'm going to keep down this path for now. Maybe at some point, if it gets to be way too much of a pain, eventually I may swap back over and do one icon for each mode and then just hide and show. That's more like how I did on the Octopus game. Essentially made everything exist and then just choose to hide or show it. So I'd rather not like do this every single iteration. This feels very verbose, but I guess we could do this. So we check X and Y, and then for each one, if it's not what it's supposed to be, then change it to be what it's supposed to be. Okay. So we should be able to go into choose rotor 1 state, and it should draw our little dot for us. That is E2. It's probably down a little bit farther than it should be, though, truthfully. Even a little, honestly. One question we do have is, so right now our listener is inside of main menu. Go to the different modes. I do want you to be able to go directly from one to the other, though. So I think what we're going to do is cut this. Put it back. Take that, put it here. But we're going to have some ors. We're going to basically have one for each of these, so... Wait, let's use in. Be nicer, actually. Current state in. State main menu. State choose rotor 1. Okay. If the current state is any one of those four, they choose reflector also. If it's in any of those, then we will handle these buttons the same. I don't really like this like that. And all of these will let us change our state. So let's do a rotor 2. And then I'm actually going to swing back around. Well, I'm going to do rotors 1, 2, and 3 to make sure that our circle is moving to the right spot. And then after that, we're going to do the encoder actually changing the value of current setting. Rotor 2. We could maybe refactor this to be... Yeah, why don't we refactor this actually? Let's say let's call this update mode select icon, and then you pass it the key. Worry about the best place to put it later, but for now I'm just gonna throw it right here. Update mode select icon mode key. This will basically be all of this. Now we can avoid repeating it. Have you even resorted to placing them in a single background bitmap and then covering it with a solid polygon filled with the background color? Oh, interesting. Instead of hide it, instead of hide it with hidden, you hide it by like putting a blocker in front of it. Happens to be the same color as the background. Mode select rotor 1, so we'll do mode select icon. 2. We'll worry about these in a minute, but this should let us go between rotor 1 and rotor 2. selection modes. Nope, crash. Untype has no key number. 22. Oh. We can only check the key event if there actually was a key event. I guess it's fair. Oh. Yes. We actually not hardcode this. Otherwise, obviously, it will be hardcoded. There we go. This one doesn't work yet, but we'll add it. It could be down, I think, 1 maybe. Means I assume this will probably need to be down by 2. Wow, more, actually, quite a bit more. Kind of weird. Why is the difference between these two not the same as the difference between these two? Oh well. Too far. Back it to 30 or 31? Is 31 going to be the sweet spot? That's pretty good. Like 30. Okay. Okay. So now, while we're in these modes, we want to have the rotary encoder start cycling through the available rotors. So we need to figure out how to even get the rotary encoder. I guess it's probably on this. Maybe. We can't go into that, though. Probably in the example. No, that's rotation of the display, I think. Macropad.encoder. Okay. The one thing is we are gonna want. Wait, does the encoder always start on 0 or? Let's say we have context previous encoder. The Macropad set up yet? Previous encoder value, it starts there. And now when we're in these modes, we want to go if context previous. I am always switching back and forth between single and double. If the previous value is different from the current value. Let's make a current value. Previous value is different from the current value, then we know it changed. Why? We know it changed, and when it changed, we want to get the difference. And we want to move that amount through the list of possible rotors. Means we need indexes, I think. Doing that kind of thing on a black background is easy. If you have an image background, you have to remove one label. Yeah, it's true. If you don't have a solid color in the back, then the blocker is a much harder technique. Scripts where RAM becomes a concern. Would something like remove pop be preferable? I mean, pop should give you some RAM back, I think, but I think it really depends a lot on if you plan to show the thing again. Like if the thing is going to come back reasonably often or reasonably soon, then it may be better to keep it in RAM than delete it and recreate it. But I think the real answer is like it depends a lot. It depends on a lot of variables, depends on a lot of stuff about what it's doing and what device it's running on. In general, I would say like my take would be code it the easiest way, code it in the way that makes it easiest to understand for you. And if you run out of RAM doing it that way, then start trying to use less RAM in various ways. But in general, on a first pass, I would always say just try to write it the way that it is easiest to understand. Because a lot of times it will have plenty of RAM to work, and so any kind of tricks that you do to make it go into smaller RAM are good. They take up less RAM, but if it's making it harder to understand, then kind of just trading off RAM for time, developer time. We need indexes, I think, right? Because at any given time, we have like rotor 1 is equal to this object here, but we don't know its index. Maybe we could add index in here. That feels a little wonky, but it would work. Why did that go way over there? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay. It's better. Going back to every. Okay. 3, 4, 5. 0, 1, 2, 3. And we have indexes, which means when we have indexes, once we get the difference, we can take our current index, add the difference. Our current index is context config. We are in rotor 1, so this is going to be rotor 1. Seriously, I have even within the same line. It's like my brain just wants to swap back and forth for no reason. Now I completely lost train of thought on it. Okay, config rotor 1 index. That's our current index. New index is current index plus difference. But we're also going to go ahead and give it the old percent divide, which has a different name, of the length of the possible rotors. Modulus, that's what that's called, not percent divide. This way, if we were to go over the number of things in here, it will just wrap back around to the beginning. Okay, now we have new index, so we want to go context config rotor1 is equal to possible rotors new index. And we want to update display, which I guess we'll make a function called update display. Yeah, that's probably about as torture test of a background as you could get for the old blocker technique. You really just can't blocker technique that unless you're like slicing sections out of the same image as the background, just because the stars and the gradients and everything make it so that no part can really just be covered up with a solid color. As if it'll come back for pop versus hidden. Yeah, in my mind, that's where it would be. Like, if you're not going to bring it back, then pop is good because it gets rid of it, more. If you are going to bring it back, then hidden is nice because you just set that to true, and then later on you set it to false. And it still spends RAM the whole time, but it's quick and easy, and you don't have to create it again. Whereas if you delete it and recreate it, you save some RAM, but it makes the code a little bit more convoluted, and you could also run into problems with, like, I guess, fragmentation or whatever, where you have enough RAM, but it's not in the right spots. It's not contiguous or something like that. Can also still end up being problematic. Update display. So we basically want to change the label for this. So, I mean, basically we just want to do this whole thing again, right? Text. This needs to be like that, though. I don't like how triple quote strings have to get messed up indentation. I think it should be allowed to be indented, and it should ignore the indentation. It should ignore enough to get it in line with the line above it, but it actually doesn't. It counts it, and we don't want those literally, so we have to put this back like this. And then, like, it'd be nice if you could do this, but you can't because now you have a new line here, which we also don't want. So you end up where your first line has to be out like this, and then your next lines have to be way, way, way back there on the edge. Which in our case, we're only indented one, so it's not that big a deal. But if we were like in a class, in a function, you know, in a CodePy or whatever, it starts to be looking a little weird anyway. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk about triple quote strings. When we get the text like that, we're just going to be setting it back to the label. Text equals new text. And this will always update based on config. Straightforward. So I'm pretty sure when we are on choose rotor 1 state, we should be able to, I think we should be able to start making a selection. No, something is wrong. So I moved the encoder, and all of a sudden the screen is flashing. And I think that that means we are continually updating the display, but we are continually updating it with the same stuff that's already on it. We need to update previous encoder. Yeah, if we don't update that, then when we compare back to it, how did... Yeah, our logic is definitely messed up somehow. We're not counting by ones. I don't know what I've done, but it's wrong. Okay, so Oh, okay. Well, first of all, difference is not previous encoder. We need to subtract. Object fill equal our object color is none. Interesting. Color to none on shapes and stuff. I think maybe. None. With bitmap label, you can do something with none as the color. With regular label, I think you can't. But with bitmap label, you can, I believe. I want to say the page that I know of that has the most about that is this one in the display text. This rainbow effect is done by using none as the color, I think, on a bitmap label. Yeah. Bitmap label can use none. If you use none for the color on a bitmap label, you'll essentially get transparent letters. And so then whatever you have underneath the label will show through those transparent letters. So you end up with a cutout. But I do think that, to the best of my knowledge, that's bitmap label only, not regular label. Okay, now it's counting by 1, but it feels backwards. Because I feel like turning right should count up, but we're actually counting down. So I think if we just this way. Yeah. Cool. Okay. BRB. Okay. Yeah. Do that in headers because I have no idea if SPDX will continue if I keep using code comment in the header. Or triple quote stuff to break out of it. The triple quote? DX? I have no idea if SPDX will continue if I keep using code comment in the header. I think you can use, I'm pretty sure you can use regular ones and it won't interfere with SPDX thing. I think, to the best of my knowledge, SPDX is only looking for the 3 or 4, like the regular lines that are there. I think it's only looking for those. It will ignore the ones that come after it, even if they are like comments formatted the same way or whatever. Okay, so that's perfect. We just want it to now do each of the rotors the same way, which should just be a matter of copying this. And so if we're copying a chunk of code, maybe we could refactor that a bit. So we said I want to put all of this in a function. I think we want it to be like what are we doing? We're taking the current encoder value and the mode that we're in. we're using those two things combined to update the currently selected rotor for that position. Update selected rotor. I'm tempted to put from encoder, but that is like very, very long for a function name, so update selected rotor, that should be fine, I think, though. We do that. Well, let's pass it current encoder, and it can always access previous from context. So let's take all of this. Def, I already forgot what I called it. Update selected encoder. Current encoder, which is actually current encoder value, but that's fine. Current context previous, so this will update. Yeah, the thing is, we would not need rotor 1 here. We need to figure out which rotor we're on. Maybe we should just pass it that too, I think. Rotor key. Yeah, I think I like that better. So then here we'd say current encoder, and then we'd say rotor 1 because we're inside the state for rotor 1. Resolved reference. Maybe I didn't name it the same thing. Oh, rotor versus encoder, yeah. If the rotary encoder has changed, then boy, it's tricky. We have a rotary encoder, and then we have rotors, the concept of the disks. If the rotary encoder has changed, then update the selected rotor, which is based on the new value and the current mode that we're in, which we effectively just pass in like that. So now we should be able to just grab this bit right here, put that in each one of these, change it to rotor 2, change it to rotor 3. Good on that, I think. Oh, let me catch up. Oh, I was already there pretty much. I'm using display text as label, not using bitmap label. Personally, I default to bitmap label. But it is newer, and I think there's a lot more code that just says regular label. But it also does not actually matter that much most of the time. It mostly matters if your text is long. Like if you have 1 or 2 words in the label, I don't think it matters that much. But if you have like a whole paragraph, then it starts to matter in ways where bitmap label can save you some RAM. Cool. I don't know, technically I don't know if they would have allowed using the same rotors. So like I don't know if that's a valid setting to have all of them on rotor 5, but you can do them in whatever order you want. So you could say rotor 1, you know, waltz 1 for rotor 3, and then you could say waltz, well, 2 is 2, I guess, but, you know, you could have whatever. Waltz 4 if you wanted. Say 2, so you can put them in whatever order you want there. So we should be able to encode a string, I think, right? Because when we initialize Enigma machine, we do it based on our config. We're now changing our config. Based on the rotors, so yeah. Do the same message for now. New file, input.txt. Put our message in it, save it. Let it boot up. Let's go ahead and change it. So we'll say maybe 3, 4, 1. And then it is currently the 0 button, which is top left. So this should give us scrambled text that's different than here because we've used different rotors, but we should be able to unscramble our text afterwards using the same settings, which is 3, 4, 1. Oh, we need to make a way to get back to main mode. Yeah, see this main menu? We don't have a way to get back to main menu. That was anticlimactic. Okay, so let's say I like bottom left, so that would be, I don't even know. I mean, if that's 11 and 9, I think I almost want to make another one of these. So if we're in choose rotors, and actually eventually we'll add more states to this, because even if you're in like choose settings or choose indexes, we would also have the back button, which is what we're doing. So if key event back button we set as 9, we want to go back to main menu. So context, what did I say? Current state, state main menu. Okay, 4, 3, 1. We do still have our input because the device has not actually booted up fully. Just saving CircuitPy doesn't count as a full boot up, and it only deletes input on a full boot up. We still have that. So we need to get back to main mode, which would be our back button. However, we don't hide the selector, which we probably should. Theoretically, we should be in main menu though, so we should be able to do this. We get our ciphertext, it's gonna reboot. 3, 4, 1, those were our rotors. Let's copy those. Input, it figured out is gone. Input, put it back. I don't know why it always starts with the cursor way over there. That's kind of interesting. Put our ciphertext in, and then let's make it so that we hide mode select icon dot hidden. True. Three, 4, 1. Back to main menu. Uh-oh. Did I do? Maybe I did 4, 3, 1. Was it 4, 3, 1? It might have been 4, 3, 1. Boy. There we go. Yeah, 4, 3, 1. Cool. Okay. And then it reboots and deletes input. Back to there. Cool. So now we can select the rotors. We can select the order of the rotors. And then we can encipher our message based on the rotors we have selected. And then if we select the same rotors, we can get back our original message. I think that I'm gonna call it quits there for now. I got a pretty good start on this. Obviously, there's still much to do in terms of we haven't even touched the reflector setting. We haven't even touched indexes or so-called settings on the rotors. Or the rings, ring indexes, ring settings. So obviously there's still a fair amount to do, but we got a pretty good start on it. We got the basics busted out so that when I do sit back down and start working on this some more, I kind of have the basis fleshed out. We can start just adding, and it's going to be really easy to start adding more and more stuff to this because it's just as simple as implementing the different states now that we've got those set up. I'll try to keep refactoring out methods like this so we can hopefully avoid repeating huge chunks of code. At some point we should figure out what we're doing with this. Do we care about any key events when we're in the rotor select mode? Eventually we will. Right now we don't, but eventually we will, because I think another button when you're in rotor select mode will be how you get to like index select mode or setting select mode. Those things. So you'll go like rotor 1 select, and then I don't know, maybe you press the same button again, or maybe you press the middle row button or something, and that will get you over to like ring index for rotor 1 setting. And you press it again, you get to ring setting for rotor 1 setting. But all right, I will leave you with that for now. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Enjoyed all of the chat and interaction here in the Discord. Thanks for stopping by, saying hey, and dropping knowledge about all the different stuff we talked about. Hope everybody has a good rest of your day and weekend. I may be back sometime tomorrow. I may pop the stream on and work on this some more. We'll kind of see. It's the same as usual. If you want the notifications for that, you can follow me over on Twitch. Otherwise, yeah, have a good weekend, and I will catch you next time. Take it easy.